So what we now also have in our market is some people that are a few years further down the track. So welcoming to the stage, Kelsey, who's going to be our moderator for this conversation, and Rob Gaunt, who acquired ACE training a few years ago, and then a bolt-on multi-skills training a year or so after that. But you're now, Rob, up to ticked over three?
Just on 3 years.
Just ticked over 3 years, right. So we had the year one students, and now we've got the year three student. So really interesting to see how that conversation compares and contrasts to this conversation now a few years further down the track. And again, as I said at the beginning of the day, like keep that resilience theme in mind, right? Like what are all the things that happen? These guys are 12 months in, 24 months behind now where Rob is. And so let's see what comes out of this conversation. Thank you very much, guys.
Great. So my name is Kelsey Winney. I'm currently searching. I'm about 9 months into my process. I'm just going to have a bit of a chat with Rob today about, how his first couple of years have gone, what some of the challenges were, and looking at the market at the moment. We'll definitely do some questions at the end as well if anyone wants to pick up on that. So maybe just for a bit of background, Rob, do you want to tell us about the business that you've bought and what the process was to get there?
Yeah, before I kick off, it's funny. I think that the title of this session was post honeymoon, and just sitting here and listening to everyone, it's weird to think that there is a honeymoon period because it feels like it's been a very similar experience the whole way through. I can get into a little bit of a bit about why, but I launched a search fund with an accelerator, SME Ventures, in 2020. Searched for just over a year. Bought my business in August 2021. Interestingly, similar to some of the others, we actually found it quite early, and it was a protracted deal phase as well. It's an RTO, so it's a training business that operates regionally in Victoria. We got 6 branches, and it specializes in construction and high-risk license training. And luckily, after listening to the session this morning, they look like there's some good tailwinds, but yeah, it's a training
Together.
business.
Yeah. So if we're looking at like what does honeymoon look like, as sort of like a point in the sand, if these guys have been sort of 12 months in, at what stage in the process did you start to feel like you're not on the beach anymore and you're like things are either getting really good or really bad?
Well, after listening to that, it almost seems like I might be in the honeymoon now, because the first year is definitely exactly what you heard, and it was interesting. Obviously, knowing everyone and knowing the journeys, I can relate to almost everyone. Maybe Ryan's had a little bit easier, but certainly getting punched in the face is familiar. So look, I think the difference between where I'm now and where I was in that first year is probably a little bit more maturity in the business and how we view the sector. So you go through these operational things that you work on, you implement new systems. A lot of people forget that you're learning a sector, you're learning a customer base, you're learning a business process as well. So you're applying good practice to a new sector, which you're making some assumptions about, and I think Luke said it quite right. You sometimes need to test some of those. So we're at the point now where we've gone through some of that, and we've done 2 acquisitions in 3 years. What took us probably a year and a half in the first business to identify what the things are that we wanted to change, and then how do we actually go about it, took us just over 4 months in the second business. So we'd done a lot of the learning, and it does get quicker. I mean, Richard's followed a similar path there. You guys have got a fairly set structure that you roll out. And so you learn what the structure is that works, and then you figure out sometimes why it doesn't work and how you need to adapt, which is a nice position to be in. I think you're always looking at the next part of that. So, my advice to searchers who are stepping in and probably reflective of some of the challenges that I had was focus on the revenue side of things, because it's so easy to get sucked into operations. The problem, like Luke said, is it's really hard to do that when you don't have visibility on what's coming up and you're having to do with budgeting, and then you have a couple of setbacks, whether it's staff turnover or whatever it is, and then cash flow is an issue. And so it's just juggling everything, which can be really difficult. Certainly from where I am now to then, we're a year and a half into the second transaction, into the second business. As I mentioned, kind of rolled through some of those ops changes fairly well. We've now got a structure that works for us. And now the difference in my role is almost it's allowed me to tilt my head up a little bit and start looking at the sector as a sector, not just my business and where we fit in that. So we're now looking at some of the macro trends that come with our business. We're looking at how do we diversify some of our revenue. We're getting to know our customers really well, which is such a privilege compared to where we were for so long. Um, and that's quite an exciting space. It almost opens up the field a little bit more. You're not so in the business. We've also got good people, and the people have been through that journey as well. So the team grows as well, which is really good.
Yeah, so we were talking on the Wayfinder call, anyone that was on there, a few months ago about like when's the right time to start looking for an acquisition if that's your strategy to grow. Like you can't, there's never a perfect time. I think we've sort of established that. But when do you go out and start looking for things? And what does your opinion on what you were looking for as a bolt-on change from what you were looking from original standalone business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer that's going to fit everyone, but for us, it was probably earlier than we were ready for, but in retrospect, at the right time. So I don't think it's ever going to feel like the right time, and if it has, it's probably a little bit too late. Our investment thesis was always around geographic expansion. Um, for the second acquisition, I was sitting with our chief training officer one night. We were looking at the geographies that we had identified in the search phase of where we wanted to be. We were reassessing the competitive landscape there, looking at how we're going to penetrate, what's the cost going to be, and our biggest competitor in those sectors. We thought it would just be a hell of a lot easier if we bought these guys, because the thought of having to go and set up and spend money on infrastructure and capital equipment and people, and then acquire customers, and how long does that take? And yeah, so I found the owner's email through kind of guessing it right when I looked at the staff registry, and I sent him an email saying, "Hey, like this is who I am. This is what I've done. I've bought this business. I'd love to get together and have a chat." And it was literally the same thing that we do on search. Obviously, you carry a little bit more weight being an industry acquirer, but the process is exactly the same. And at the time, I got asked, one from our team, but also equally from the board and investors. Why do you think you guys can take this on when we kind of not really out of the weeds with the first one? And look, we had conviction that we would get there. The other thing is, as everyone said, deals take time,
Yeah.
and you don't have to do it. So you can be looking, if it's semi the right time. Um, it's going to take time to do that. We've seen that on average, it's I think a short deal time, particularly if you're getting debt, is you know 6, probably 8 months, and an average one is around 12. So even though it might be a little bit premature, by the time you get to the execution point, you're quite a way down. The only thing I'll say on that is it sucks out bandwidth. So I was lucky, I reached out to one company. We managed to progress that fairly well. It had its spikes in the deal as well. There was it wasn't easy. Uh, but you're a lot more educated on the sector. So you can look at the business, see the red flags. You've just lived through a year of them anyway. And so you're a lot more prepared in that sense. But I don't know if there's ever specifically a right time. I mean, for us, it doubled the size of our business. We weren't ready for that. We were a geographically based business that we had to get staff to move as well. But I had a good core team, and we knew that it was the right thing to do. So we kind of, like most searchers, just kind of went for it, and
Yeah.
it turned out all right.
Yeah. Well, it's we kind of all hoping and praying that that's how things work. When we are talking before about, you come in and you realize that some of your IT systems are a mess, or you've got some people that maybe are not quite the right fit. When you're thinking about it as, you're not only trying to get your head still around your first business, but you're also joining in a second one. How did your sort of approach to integration of culture, but also like back office system, did you feel more equipped for it the second time around? And did you sort of jump faster into things with the learnings that you had?
Yeah, we did. We knew what we wanted to do. Uh, we had built them before, and again, the challenge in these things is kind of some of the guys said is you might know what you need to do, and I think Ryan pointed out they've been implementing a system for quite a while. There's no one else to do it but you. So you have to make the decisions you're making, do this, and then often this is a overtime at night thing where you're like, let me figure out now how to build Employment Hero or whatever it is. Um, and everyone else is mostly in these businesses working in the business. They've got a job to do. They're doing it. So bandwidth is a struggle. I think for the second one, I pushed it through a lot more aggressively. I kind of threw some of the change management stuff out the window and said, this is going to be the best thing for us. And, people are either going to be along for the ride or they're not. And I want to know that quicker because we've got a structure that's going to allow us to view this in the way that we now need to. Um, so it's a lot easier because you have confidence in what you're doing is the right thing. Plus you've kind of done the thinking work. It's just about how quickly can you implement.
Yeah, and just making those changes as you need to. So, given that you're sort of into your third year of operating now, and you start to look towards what is your exit strategy, not necessarily today, but in the sort of years to come, and you plan towards that, what are some of the pressures that come from like you as an individual versus the investors versus the potential financial growth for the business that maybe are heading in different directions from each other to make that decision about like when, what it looks like, how's everybody on the same page?
Yeah. So some of the challenges that we face, we go into a business with investment thesis, having never operated in the sector most of the time, and there are some assumptions that you make along the way on multiple fronts. One, where value creation comes from. Two, how are you going to operate? Uh, how is the business going to then grow? And obviously, if you're following a search model, you've got return thresholds that you need to meet in order to kind of achieve some of those equity milestones as well. And what I found in my experience is, we bought into the education space, and were some macro drivers there that have now changed, and with that, the business model has to change as well. And so just like what you thought you bought on day one isn't the same thing. Business models can need to adapt, and that's something that affects not only the strategy of the business, it could affect the return profile as well. Obviously, investors have come on with an original thesis, and so there's communication around what that looks like. And so I think juggling, first of all, figuring that out is quite difficult, but then managing alignment can be challenging as well. That's not to say it can't be overcome, but it's another factor that when you're in the first year, you're not even thinking about it. And to be honest, you haven't earned the right to think about that. It's something that is an ongoing change element. And timing has effect on things as well. As Ryan kind of pointed out, some of these things take longer than you anticipated. Um, but equally, there are flip sides to that as well. You unlock value creation opportunities that you didn't know. And so one of the things that I think is kind of important here is as a searcher, as a board member, even for the investor base, is just to be open to the fact that things will change. These businesses and these returns play out over 6, 7, 8 years. We're seeing that in the state continue through. Um, a lot of things happen in between there. And so I think being flexible to that and being able to have the conversation around that is pretty important.
Yeah. So just for some context for people that may be a bit more new to the space, if you are looking to go down the, double in size acquisition route over the next few years, what's your like sources of capital within the existing model that allows you to to buy new things? And how do you see like when's the best point like what's the growth that you think you need to achieve before you guys start to have that chat about where do we go from here?
I mean, capital allocation and sourcing is the thing that you deal with the most as a CEO and as a board member. You're making sure that you're spending money on the right things, that you're balancing cash. The good thing is the flywheel effect does come into play. And so, we're in year 3 on our first acquisition. We've amortized 60% of our debt. And so additional debt funding is obviously available. Plus you've got the target if it is an acquisition that you're looking at doing. You can look at bringing other investors in, and we did that in our second raise. There were some people that wanted to get out. We were able to facilitate that. Equally, we were able to bring some new shareholders in, and I think that that's the type of flexibility that you need to be open to. Ultimately, you've only got so many sources, right? You've got debt, you've got the cash flow that the business is generating, and then you've got equity that you can raise. And so, everyone has a different view on the way to do that. Everyone has a different view on how much debt the business should have at any one time. So I think that if you're going to be doing acquisitions, obviously you want them to be accretive. As a searcher for your own equity, you want it to be accretive, but certainly for shareholders which are aligned with that. I think that what we'll see is what's happened. I know in the States as well is that there will be opportunities to potentially change what the return profile of the business is based on the market. And with that comes the opportunity to potentially realign shareholders as well. And that opens some doors and it closes some doors.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. Just before we go on to some closing points, looking at the market now versus what it was 5 years ago, what do you think are some of the benefits of the growth of the population of people that are talking about this, and the information that's shared between, for example, the 4 first-year operators, that we can learn from each other to make those early years as easy as possible, and to sort of help people find those skeletons before they arise?
Look, the community is great, and I think everyone here who's been here for the last couple of years can attest to that. People are very willing to share stories and to share resources. I am 3 years in. There are people that are a couple of years more experienced in their acquisition than I am. I've called them a bunch of times asking questions. We've got a really good network here. And the CEOs speak to each other all the time, and the searchers speak to us all the time as well. And so I think it's a really good testament to sharing learning. That being said, you can never really plan for the unknown.
Established that quite well today.
Yeah, and I think, look, one of the things I think is happening, which I think is great, is we're getting. I think we saw it in Jake's slide. There is more capital coming into the search community from domestic investors. I love to see people with operating experience or who have run SMEs being investors. They're often really good people, even if they're not on the board, that you can speak to as well, and they kind of get it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's something that's really positive. I think it might not help the learning curve, but it makes you feel more comfortable in being uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, it's always nice to have someone to call.
Yeah.
It's like a problem shared as a problem halved. Just now you're sitting in the business owner operator seat. If someone was to approach you about buying your business, what are some of like the pieces of advice? Like what would you see as, oh, like that's good practice, or no, I'm not going to respond to that conversation. Having been shoe on the other foot previously, like how's your take on someone approaching you about you being the seller?
So if I'm applying it to a searcher who's looking to acquire,
Yeah.
one of the things that I probably would have done differently, even though I don't know if I really would have, is focus a little bit more on the macro, probably because it's just playing out for me like that. And look at some of the assumptions I've made on exit and hold. And even if it didn't change anything, just being aware that you may need to be a little bit flexible in that. I think as when you're going through the due diligence phase, as the guys have pointed out, there's information there's information you don't know. You try your best to know what you don't know, but often you don't until you've taught it. In which case you're in anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I don't think that there is a recipe that you can follow that's going to make you more or less successful in this road, because you're going to face challenges that come up that are just varied. But for me, it's been about being able to adapt and to prioritize and to, as an operator, look at, okay, what are the things that we really need to know, and being comfortable that there are things we're not going to know for a while. And I think that's where the board can help in assisting you going through what that process should be. As now someone who's operated a business for a while, and this is the second business that I've operated, depending on the business model, would change on what I would focus on.
Yep.
And so there are definitely some things that I have as an operator of my business that I know work well. But that may not apply to another sector or to another business.
Yeah, I think going into that first conversation, knowing a decent amount about that industry is really helpful about building that relationship from the beginning, because then you all sort of know that you're on the same page. I think that sort of covers most like high level points that we wanted to talk about. Is there anything else that you want to add before we go to questions?
It's also a lot of fun, and for a lot of people here that will really resonate. I mean, I stumbled across search when I heard Alex and Jake speak at a PwC evening one night when I was doing my MBA, and for me that was like a light bulb moment. I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. I didn't know if it was even possible at the time. There was no search fund community, so I think everyone's in a much better position now. But for people who love operating and doing this, the challenges are the fun as well. And you do get through some of those big scary ones. And I'm sure there'll be a few more that come, but it is a very rewarding journey. And I think it's something that if it resonates with you is something that sets you on a path for life, which is great.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. We're okay to go questions. Yeah, yeah. If anybody's, as Pete said before, just jump straight up. Over here, yeah.
Just curious, having bought a services business, when you're doing DD on the acquisition opportunity, what's a couple of things you rate to focus on at first? So anything that you pull out, so like, I want to prioritize this with my first couple.
I mean, a service-based business, you want to be focusing on utilization. And so, it's a people business. People bring problems. And so we've got 80 odd staff, and there's quite a lot of problems that come out of having that many people. So looking at it that lens and understanding like, where does value come from? Where does revenue come from? Looking at utilization rates. For us, it's trainers. So we want to know we're deploying our people right. And there's X amount of bums on seats. And so that's really been something that I've honed in on now. And when I look at new opportunities, I look at how do you guys do that? And if they can't reasonably articulate that, that's okay. But I want to make some assumptions on that. And I think really understanding like what drives your revenue, and how does the business and the team look at that is probably something I'd focus for a service business.
Oh, in here, Alex.
I mean, I come from a sales background, so you're always going to spin it. And so what we do is we say we bought
He
the
does that
business
to the
because
board
we
too.
love it.
I heard this is-
And so you go with a really good narrative. We've done this. We want to. We're looking to invest more into the business. We bought it because we love it, and I think it does give you a really good opportunity to re-engage with customers. I've flipped on this a few times in owning our business. I at first thought we weren't very good at servicing our customers, but they were just reoccurring customers. We then bought the second one and realized actually we're not too bad in the first one. But either way, it's just an opportunity to engage. So I think it creates a good talking point. It creates a good time to go and learn your customers. it took us a year and a half to get to the point where we were ready to have those conversations as we are now. But I think all in all, it can be viewed very positively. I mean, depending on the changes you're making, you're going to know that if you're doing certain things, you're going to potentially sacrifice some of those customers. But ultimately, if you believe it's the right thing, you should be fine.
Any other questions? No?
Anything
Okay.
from you, Pete?
Good.
No.
Got
Okay.
lots of questions. I'll wait for the next board meeting. Sorry, did I hear one over there? It was actually just a little side point, just because I was sitting down here and all these guys are sitting up here. Every now and then there was like a little bit of eye contact about a particular comment that was being made, just as whether or not it was consistent at the most recent board meeting that we just had. Pretty much all of it was consistent, so it's a good sign. No, thank you very much, Kelsey, for leading that conversation, and thanks very much, Rob, for sitting up here again. Like as I said in the last one, this is a new kind of horizon for us as a community to have these people to access and have that kind of raw feedback loop for us to look into. So we should really lean in on it. These journeys are really, really tangible, and the stuff you would have heard common kind of comments coming back from each of them. Very, very different businesses, like across the 5 that we're talking about here. Very, very broad scope, different businesses and different challenges and different markets and regions they're playing in, but a relatively consistent kind of spectrum of issues that they're facing. So lots of learning that you can take across different businesses and across different searches. But please, thank you to Kelsey and Rob.